Welcome to the Intermittent Gentleman, and today is the 45th day check of the Zippo-Style Survivor Lighter Long-Term Review. Additionally, today we are going to do a little bit of a deep dive on the Surprus Zippo case. If you look back, a link will be provided in the description. On the 30th day check, we did a deep dive into the Thyrm Pyrovault Zippo case. So let's get to it and take a look at these lighters and see how they're doing at day 45. So just a quick run through here on the lighters. We'll do a light check. So you can see a couple strikes or attempts, but the Thyrm is still lighting. The Surprus additionally on the second light is still lighting as well. And you saw with both of the Zippo cases, the lids were a little bit stuck, maybe a manual open, but I think now that they've been opened after a little bit of storage, they are good to just flip open with the press of their button. Just a little bit of an annotation on the Thyrm. I mentioned that my lid did not spring open the whole way with the release of the switch here. I took a little bit of lubricating oil and just touched up and then blew out with some pressurized air the spring here, as well as on the inside. And you can now see that my Thyrm does open with enough clearance to successfully light the lighter. The Exotac titanLIGHT, all good there. The regular Zippo has the Vector Thunderbird butane insert in. And then the Amazon generic peanut lighter. Lights up as well. Additionally, on day 45, I subjected all of these lighters except for the Vector that's just sitting in a regular Zippo case to a water test. So let's cut to the water test and see how that went.
Alright, so we're here with the water test. In order to test the water resistance of these lighters and lighter cases, I submerged them for 24 hours in a water pitcher overnight. Now, of course, I did not submerge the Vector Thunderbird insert that is just sitting in a normal Zippo case. This does not offer any water resistance, it doesn't advertise any water resistance, so no testing there. But let's see how they did. So let's take a look at the Thyrm Pyrovault. Now, one thing about the Thyrm Pyrovault that I did not mention in my individual review of it is, if you can see there, the spring is exposed for the switch here. So thinking about corrosion, if you were to have one of these submerged or exposed to water for a long time, what exposed metal parts are there? So the spring, as well as the pin hinge for the lid, the pin here that holds the switch, as well as the spring for the switch. So let's see, it's not opening on its own, a little pull there. And you can see that the O-ring held up pretty well. Some moisture around the edge. A little bit of moisture inside the lid there. Could have been from just opening it just now. But the wick appears dry. And we'll give it a spark. Okay, so tough to get a spark off. Could be my fingers wetting the wheel as I'm going there. So we have the Thyrm after 24 hours and about 10 inches of water there. Let's take a look at the Surprus here. So the Surprus exposed metal parts are going to be this hinge, extra safety latch or secure latch, pin holding the button in, the push button itself, a pin holding the latch here, and most likely water getting in here into the internal spring mechanism as well. So if I just give it a push, flicks open, and it looks like the spring for the hinge may not get as much exposure to water there as you can see compared to the Thyrm be on the outside. But through this pin slot, I'm sure moisture is getting in there still too. Looking at through the lens, I would say it appears that there's less moisture around the edge here than there was on the Thyrm. Let's give this a spark and see what happens. All right. No flame there. Again, probably from my my wet thumb here against the striker wheel. Let's take a look at the Amazon keychain peanut lighter here. So screw off the top. Here we go. Get it to focus. Alright. There we go. And we got a flame on the peanut lighter. Alright, let's take a look at the Exotac titanLIGHT. And you know what? Because I forgot to dry my hands off from the very start with the Thyrm, I'm not going to dry my hand off here either. Just going to unscrew the lid, take a look at the level of moisture or lack thereof for the Exotac titanLIGHT, and just going to give it a spark, and there we go. Flame on the first try. So, to no surprise, the two lighters with screw-down caps and O-rings, whether this one being a little bit exposed, the Exotac inner seam O-ring, but the screw-down lids fared a lot better than we saw with the two flip-top lids. Now, in a situation where your lighter needed to be waterproof, whether it was raining really hard, or maybe you were doing some water sports like kayaking or canoeing, or just on the lake or wading in the water doing some fly fishing, and you needed to use your lighter, most likely you would dry your hand off before using, and probably dry the outside of the case off anyway before using. But we saw with the two flip-top lid lighters that even though we could get a spark, not quite getting a flame there with Thyrm, and with the Surprus, now we do have a flame. And that was just using my left hand here that's stayed a little bit drier throughout the check. I'm curious. Let me try this Surprus again here. 3 or 4 tries. Now we're getting the flame. I would probably chalk up the first attempts on the Thyrm and the Surprus, something to do with, using the hand I'm going in to grab the lighter with, striking the flint wheel. But on the other hand, we did have success with that same variable staying consistent with the Amazon peanut lighter as well as the Exotac titanLIGHT. So take that data point for what you will, and let's get back to the long-term review.
Welcome back from the water test. As you saw, the Thyrm and the Suprus were having some trouble striking, and again, I believe that was because I was using the hand I submerged into the pitcher of water and was getting the striking or flint wheel wet while I was trying to light it. Again, the Thyrm and the peanut lighter, though, still lit regardless of that wet thumb. Now, additionally, the Thyrm is, I think, on its last leg. So I did already weigh the lighters, and I will annotate in the description below. But the Thyrm has lost more significant weight compared to the other lighters. And you'll probably see in the 5-second burn that I do believe the Thyrm is on its last leg. So I do believe that if it was filled with lighter fluid and took a dunk in the water there, that it would still be able to light successfully, very similar to how the Suprus performed. I would suggest though that if your lighter does take a dunk, um, dry off your hands as well as just dry off the outer case before you open it and expose the internals to getting possibly wet. Let's take a deeper dive into the Surprus Zippo case. Now, with the Surprus here, it's very similar to the Thyrm, where it's a Zippo case only, made out of a polymer material. Now, this polymer feels a little bit different than the Thyrm. This feels more like an ABS hard plastic, whereas the Thyrm here is more of that ubiquitous injected molded polymer. This feels a little bit more brittle, but I think on day 60's test, we'll do a drop test and we'll see how they hold up. Now, additionally, with the Surprus, it is, you do have a lanyard hole. It is a spring-loaded lid with a push button, but the Surprus has an additional wire safety latch, if you will. Now, two things this probably does is going to be prevent the button, or if the button is actuated in your pocket or in your bag, the lighter's not going to fly open. Additionally, when you do close it, it does feel like it's giving a little bit more downward pressure for a better seal against those O-rings, for possibly more longevity from an evaporation of fuel standpoint, as well as increased barrier resistance to water, mud, sand, etc. Now, the Surprus is foreign made, I believe, coming out of China, whereas the Thyrm is made in the USA. The Surprus as well, though, might be a better value. On average, on Amazon, the Surprus in this camo pattern or a flat black sits usually around $12 for just the case, whereas the Thyrm is coming in at $30. Squared off base, so easy to sit down, don't even have to think about it. We'll sit upright. Within the packaging of the Surprus, it also came with a lanyard as well as a whistle that I have purposed elsewhere, but it was a nice touch to come with the lighter. Now, both of these cases do kind of face the same inherent or design dependent flaw, if you will. And I'm going to turn the Thyrm over to the correct way that maybe a right-handed user would hold it. So we're talking about the lid flipping to the left here. When you're using the striker wheel, the buttons may get in the way a bit. You can see the Thyrms as well as the Surprus here, meaning when you're striking the wheel, your thumb is going to hit the switch. And then on the Thyrm, using both lighter cases, and it may not seem like a significant amount or a significant difference between the two here, but I would say that in use, you feel like you get a closer to 100% strike on the Surprus than you do with the Thyrm. Maybe only a matter of millimeters there that the safety latch or the latch is above the body of the lighter. It's definitely less noticeable on the Surprus though. Overall, I think the Surprus is a better buy than the Thyrm. So far, throughout testing at day 45, based on the weight of the lighters from day 0, as well as just observing the flame strength, the Surprus seems to be holding up better in the long term than the Thyrm when it comes to fuel evaporation. Additionally, some of the features like the square base, as well as the additional safety catch, I believe, wins it between the Thyrm and the Surprus. The price is a huge contributing factor. $12 for the Surprus in camo or black, compared to $30 for the Thyrm. And I don't think the Thyrm is providing double or over double the value or the features that the Surprus is. Now, if buying American made is a big deal, then the Thyrm is going to be your choice because it is made in the USA. But let's wrap this one up and get to the 5-second burn. And here we are for the 5-second burn. And you can see barely that the Thyrm is hanging on with just a flame down below the chimney at the base of the wick. Now that we're back from the 5-second burn, I would say that the Thyrm is on its last leg. I'm not quite sure that it's going to make it to the 60-day mark. Now, I will include it just for the final word that it is completely evaporated all its fuel. Additionally, I'd like to include it in the drop test as well. I'm not going to call it quits for the 45-day check because the Thyrm was still hanging in there, especially with the first 2 seconds of the light, and then the flame dwindled down to below the chimney, just a small blue flame right by the wick. Not that the Thyrm is a bad Zippo case by any means. It definitely has prolonged the life of a normal Zippo insert. Upwards of 30 to 45, maybe pushing 50 days. The Thyrm will still give you the ability to have a flame. We'll see where the others stand at day 60. Again, check the description for updated weights as well. And in the meantime, stay a gentleman. Intermittently, of course.